This is Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Bryant with All-American quarterback Chimdi Chekwa. We got a good show for you guys this week. We had a bye week as a team, a week that we didn't get a chance to play because, once again, we didn't take care of things of the team up north, man. So we didn't get to play in the championship weekend. But, Chim, how you doing, man? Did you have a chance to catch some of these games?
Yeah, I watched the games, man. I thought the games were pretty good. I didn't watch them all. Got a chance to watch the SEC championship, watch the Big Ten championship. Exciting games. I was a little bit surprised for the Big Ten championship, man. The score was 31, I think, 31-20.
30. What was you?
At halftime.
Oh, at halftime.
Halftime.
Oh, yeah.
I think 31-24 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah, that's not the Big Ten football I'm used to, man. Oregon came to the conference, high-powered offense, and Penn State, to my surprise, was able to hang with them for most of the game. Couldn't get it done, but, I mean, they are Penn State, right?
No, man, but shout out to Penn State, man. Obviously, they lose the game 37-45, but it was and they, like you said, they scored some points, but it was a physical game, man. Both sides was definitely firing all over the place. I Bleav Penn State rushed for like a crazy amount of yards, like close to 300 yards, like 290 rushing yards or something like that. But when it comes down to it, like Dillon Gabriel, who just was announced as the Heisman finalist, like, bro, Oregon is definitely you can't argue. They're definitely the number one team in the country, man. They proved it on the field, that's for sure.
Yeah, they play like the number one team, man. It seemed like Ted Johnson was just moving and fast forward the whole game. Like, he get the ball, and it just seemed like they was speeding up. I had to check my TV for a second to make sure nothing was glitching. But yeah, they looked good. They looked like a team that you expect. That is the number one team in the country at this time of the year that has figured out some of their issues that they had early on in the year. They seem to have that stuff cleaned up. So the Big Ten well represented in the college football playoffs this year. 4 teams in. All of those teams had really good years, which, there shouldn't have been no discussion or no, I know there's a lot of talk early on about Indiana, whether they deserve it. Yeah, there was none of that talk at this point when they released the college football playoffs.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Definitely Indiana, they solidified their spot. I mean, obviously they lost to Ohio State, and it was a competitive game, right? But just throughout the season, I mean, I think they average margin of victory over 30-some points, right? I mean, a top flight when it comes to defense and stopping the run. Offense with a quarterback that's very efficient, receivers all across the board, and also they can run the ball as well. So, I mean, Indiana was a complete team. Obviously, they didn't beat Ohio State. We're a good bunch as well, but they definitely deserved that spot into the playoffs. But I guess the question about the playoffs, really, when it comes down to, did SMU earn their spot into the playoffs, or did the committee get it wrong by not letting another SEC school, just get straight to it, Alabama, get that last spot into the big dance here?
Yeah, so this is where the playoff talk gets annoying for me. It's like there's 12 teams. We've been through a BCS system where they just pick 2 teams to play. Mm-hmm. Then we created the playoffs. We got to 4 teams, and there was always all the talk about who should be in and who shouldn't. Last year, Florida State went undefeated, and Alabama was chosen to go over Florida State because their quarterback got injured. Right? They did everything on the field. They beat 2 SEC teams out of conference. They ran through their entire conference. They had convincing wins. They had a quarterback injured. Still beat Florida in their rivalry game with the backup quarterback. They got the second quarterback injured, who likely was going to be able to play moving forward in the playoffs. And they chose Alabama because they said the team just doesn't look the same. Right? So now they expand the playoffs to 12 teams. Right? 12 teams now. And now we're talking, Alabama should get over. Look, there's 12 teams. All right. If it's that close to where you have more losses, you haven't the losses you have. I don't like to measure losses and say this is a good loss versus a bad loss. But the losses you have are to teams that you were favored pretty big over. All right. And now you're talking about you should get in over one other team. It's like, listen, if it's that close, you don't deserve to get in. If you get in, you made it. If you don't, you don't. At this point, nobody's feeling sorry for a team that had 3 losses, more losses than all the other teams that made the playoffs. And the losses that you had weren't great. And you had a loss late to a team that was around 500, which SMU didn't.
Yeah.
Right? So whether they deserve it more or not, we don't care. If you want to make the playoffs, you got to win games. It's
Right.
I think there was I don't know if this is a real quote. I saw this quote floating around that said Nick Saban was like, if the Browns beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, like they get them, they're able to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers one Sunday. We don't penalize the Pittsburgh Steelers and being for them to be able to make the playoffs just because they lost one game, they slipped up one game, right? So
it's a big
That's funny to me because in the NFL, there's divisions like the Steelers and the Ravens and the Bengals,
the AFC North, right?
That could be really tough. And then there's other divisions like the Titans and like there's certain divisions that are historically weak. The Jaguars, some of them get in with a losing record or they get in at 500.
500, yep.
And nobody argues anything because at the end of the day, they win the division, right? Mm-hmm. You won your division. You're at the top of your division. The other division may be tougher, but everybody in that division can't get in. The team who wins the division gets in. It's simple as that. Look, Alabama is in the SEC. Right? There's 3 teams in the SEC that are in. If you're the 4th team in the SEC, guess what? There's a good chance you're not getting in. We don't need to see you in the playoffs. We don't need to see you. We know you're the 4th best team in your own conference. You've already lost the playoff competition within your conference. You don't need to advance to another playoffs when you can't even take care of your business at home. So I'm tired of that discussion. It makes no sense.
And I think the committee kind of obviously when it comes down to it, the committee got to do something, right? It's going to be a debate no matter what. Like we could have let 100 teams in, 101st team, like, well, we deserve a shot, right? But what the committee did kind of show is that, like, they penalized you for losing to bad teams, right? So if you lost to a top 10 team and you had 1 loss or 2 losses, and that's against top 10 teams, like, you wasn't penalized to like a team who lost to somebody like you say, like Alabama, who lost to a team at 500. SMU has 2 losses on the season. I believe the first is to Boise State, who obviously lost 1 game to the number 1 team in the nation, and then they lose in the conference championship on a 56-yard field goal to Clemson, in the winding seconds of the game. And then you talk about Alabama, who lost to, like we know, to some teams that wasn't, frankly, up to par. So I think the committee did a job of saying, like, hey, this is the standard. You lost to bad teams. We're going to take that against you. Even if you look at Ohio State, right? Ohio State in the final rankings is behind Penn State. We beat Penn State head-to-head.
Yeah.
But Penn State only losses is to Ohio State. It's to Oregon, where Ohio State losses are to Oregon, but we didn't lose a game to Michigan. So now you got a worse loss. So now you're no longer ahead of this team when it comes to ranking. So, I mean, like you said, I think the committee did what they had to do. They set it up the way they set things up, and like I said, I don't have any complaints, man. But what do you think about Ohio State? We get a home game. Right? We still get a home game. We play Tennessee. Did you think that the committee got everything right across the board when you look at these matchups?
Yeah, no, they didn't get it all right. And here's the reality. They're never going to get it all right, right? You have different conferences. There's a bunch of different teams. You have to create 12. You got to shrink it down to 12 teams. And all these teams can't play each other. Of course they're not going to get it right. But here's the thing. I think they had a consistent process. And I think the process is understood enough that everybody can, from this year and moving forward, can understand what's priority. And based on who you play and how you ended up, they didn't just go out there and say, okay, this team is better, so we're going to. No. Ohio State, you mentioned Penn State. Ohio State was ranked ahead of Penn State. Mm-hmm. We lost to a team that, was barely over 500. Now, it's a big rivalry game. We throw out the schedules, all that stuff, whatever. But as a committee who has to make these decisions, we lost to a team that was below 500. We ended up behind Penn State. So now we're in a position where, the bracket is probably a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
And But if we take care of business, we end up where Penn State is, where it may be a better situation. I think one of the things they may need to consider for that team who's like an Oregon, who was able to be the number 1 seed, right? You have the games, but then being able to reseed after the initial game so that Oregon can get the best matchup throughout the playoffs, as opposed to because right now, based on the current situation, they could play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, where if if you did all the work to be a number 1 seed, right, you would like to potentially get a better matchup in the second round. But I think at the end of the day, man, it's the playoffs. You're gonna have to play some teams. You're gonna have to play some good teams. Everybody's good at this point. I don't care what nobody says.
Yep.
Everybody is good at this point. You're gonna have to play some teams and beat them. And it's as simple as that. All the Bama talk about, we're not going to schedule our strength of schedule out of conference games. We're not going to prioritize strength of schedule. We're going to try to create easy games so that we get. At some point you're going to have to play somebody. Right. At some point you're going to have to play somebody, and I think the playoffs is going to be exciting. The matchup against Tennessee, I think it's a heavyweight matchup. 2 teams that got a lot of talented players, big time players in the trenches, a lot of talent on the football field. A night game in the shoe, man. I think it's going to be an exciting game, and I think it's going to be exciting for America to watch that type of playoff game and that type of playoff atmosphere.
Yeah, but I guess one more thing. Obviously, we don't kind of talk about this playoff bracket enough, but it's something to bring up that the fact that obviously SMU got in over Alabama essentially, and we debate strength of schedule, we debate the number of losses and things of that nature. But what about the talent, right? I mean, Alabama, we don't have to guess. We know that Alabama have more NFL players on their roster than SMU does. Should that be a factor? I mean, it always kind of get down to an eye test type of situation. But should that be a factor that, hey, man, they got some horses over here that, potentially could really light things up here if they get a chance at making a run?
No, it's not a factor. It's not a factor. I grew up in Louisiana. There's some guys that were more talented than me that didn't make it to the NFL. All right. There's some guys that if we just looked on paper like that, hey, that guy right there, yeah, that Chimdi kid, he's all right. But the other guy next to him, he's a more talented guy. They didn't make it to the NFL. You don't get points. I don't like the points for talent to making these decisions. We saw you play football. We watched you lose by 3 touchdowns versus Oklahoma. Now, if I was to look on paper, I would say Alabama has more guys who are going to the NFL than Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. But guess what? You lost to them by 3 touchdowns. So at some point, the talent has to show up on the field throughout the course of a season for you to be rewarded. Rewarding individuals for just having talent. And at any given day, that talent, if they reach their max, they could be the national championship. They could be the best team. Mm-hmm. I don't care. You need to be the best team throughout the season in order to earn an opportunity. This isn't a college football charity. And, at some point, the SEC has to not be entitled to be like, okay, we've recruited a bunch of talented guys. We got a bunch of talented players. The eye test can show that we have all this talent. No, the eye test showed that the score was 24-3. All right? So that's what we got to go by, and that's the best numbers, in my opinion, to use. I think SMU had a good season. Yeah. And honestly, they were on the bubble. It wasn't like SMU was locked in for a playoff. They were on the bubble. They snuck in. When you're on the bubble, you could be in or you could be out. They ended up being in. Alabama was being out. The key thing is don't make it close. Don't be on the bubble. And I think, Alabama, better luck next year. I think that's just what it is.
Yeah. And I want to correct myself. SMU only loss was to BYU, not to Boise, for anyone who's fact-checking our show, man. But we also want to talk about early signing day, right? Early signing day took place this past week. And obviously, things are not – the recruiting process, the whole situation has changed drastically since we was in school. Yeah. Just, let's say, 20 years or so ago now when we was signing to go to colleges. You got this early signing day because a lot of guys in January are going to school, right? They're getting ready. They start working out so they can be with their school for spring ball. Ohio State had a –
They're allowing kids to report sometime here in December.
In December.
Yeah,
Wow.
and really join teams for the playoffs.
Oh wow, that's news to me, man. So
Yeah.
that's definitely getting your feet wet as soon as possible, man. But Ohio State had solid cash. I think they signed 20 plus guys. I mean, I think the signing class ended up being ranked 3 or 4 in the nation, depending on what site you're looking at. I mean, they got guys at every position. 3 offensive linemen, which is always a concern about what we're bringing in at Ohio State. 4 defensive linemen, because sometimes, if a coach doesn't bring in the right guy, our fan base say, we need to let that guy go, man. we know how our fan base can get, but I think the class is basically headlined, I would say, by our quarterback, St. Clair. What do you think, I guess, about the recruiting class? I mean, we had some surprises, right? We had a couple of guys we thought was going to come, didn't come. Naheem offered. We tried to flip some guys. We landed some. Some guys flipped on us. It's crazy.
If you just follow Twitter, you would think Ohio State's recruiting class fell out of like the top 15. You would think, like this was it was just a complete disaster class, which it wasn't, obviously. I do think probably the most surprising. I guess it wasn't so much a surprise because the hints were there, but it's still a shock that Naeem Offord ended up choosing Oregon over Ohio State after being committed to Ohio State throughout the entire process. Like even though he was visiting and he was active, he always said I didn't say I'm still locked in. I'm still
it's a tweet every week from that guy.
Right. So and you start looking at Oregon's DB class because as a class, if you just look at Ohio State, it was a good recruiting class.
Yeah.
So, but when you start comparing, you see guys like Trey McNutt, Dorian Brew, Naeem Offord. At one point, those 3 were all expected to be Ohio State defensive backs, right? And then Oregon ends up overtaking. So that just the competition at the top of the Big Ten. And then, you look at Michigan just had a rise in funds or something because they started flipping guys. They got their quarterback, who I think is number 1 in the class, with St. Clair being number 2 in the class, which doesn't mean a lot except that you got the 2 rivals, 1 and 2 quarterbacks in the class. You expect them to compete against each other for a few years, assuming everything goes as planned and they stick with their original school. So I think the biggest surprise was the defensive backs, and then you didn't get Sanders.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, David Sanders.
There was some hope for him
top offensive tackle, right? It was a hope. He came to visit us late. It was the day of signing day. He kind of was up in the air. He's asked he was going to sign with Tennessee. That was early in the day, but then by the end of the day, it was he actually signed and committed to Tennessee. So that was,
which to me is the most important one. And I'm not going to say Sanders specifically, but I just think the tackles in general are high price, high value, position, right? It's such a high value, and it's one that there's not a lot of supply. It's low supply, high demand, right? Because you go to the transfer portal, you try to go find yourself a tackle, and a bunch of guys floating around there that can come in and start. Now we were able to get Josh Simmons. How many times can you get a Josh Simmons in the transfer portal, right? So you want to get that guy young out of high school, be able to develop him and have him be a part of your program. So I think that's the big one. The cornerbacks, obviously, those you want to continue to replace what you have, but we had a really good cornerback class last year. There's a really good cornerback class coming up in 2026 in Ohio, right? Yeah. Now we got to get the guys in Ohio, but there's some guys. So
and we got David Sanchez, the number 1 corner. So
number 1 corner.
I don't know if I know you have seen him play, but for our fans, if you kind of look him up, it doesn't take long to know that this guy's a player.
He's a player
for sure.
The kid's a player, man.
He's a player.
If you only got the 1, based on what you did last year, based on what's coming in 2026, if you only got the 1, it's a solid. It's solid from a cornerback standpoint. So I mean that's the reality. And then with the transfer portal, I mean, you have these signing days and you want certain kids, and then you have the transfer portal, which really continues to shake up. So you almost got to look at signing day in contrast with what is in the transfer portal and what you have leaving as well.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question for you. This for us to kind of, but I think like I said, we had a solid class. James Larry made a splash. He grabbed a couple of linebackers, I think, out of Texas. Running back flipped late. We got several running back. I still like Bo Jackson out of Cleveland the best, but we got some other guys coming in as well that could run the rock. But yeah, like you just stated, with the transfer portal, does this signing class even really? I mean, we Buckeye Nation. We just feel like we got unlimited funds. Does this signing class even much matter, or do we just kind of pick and choose? Like, hey, we're missing a guy. We need a guy. Go get him out the portal, and that's how we expect our team to be ready for the following season. What's your thoughts on that? Does the class matter?
So the class definitely matters. The funds are never unlimited. I want to make it. I know we talked about $20 million roster this year. But we lost to Michigan. At some point, I don't know all the people who are donating, but at some point, like if you're not getting it done versus Michigan, and we're putting all this money up, then you don't want to keep putting the money up, right? I mean, right? Doesn't that make sense?
Makes sense to me. I'm not a donor, but that makes sense to me.
And you got to put some money up, man.
And I'm gonna see the ticket holder. I'm kind of a donor. I'm gonna see the ticket holder. That's,
okay.
Man. Them prices, we going up, man. So that's going straight to NIL, man.
You got to donate your services or something. But like, I think the transfer portal. I think for Ohio State, the best way of using it is to fill those gaps. You know, where is there a need? Where we got some guys, but they're not necessarily. We're not sure if they're going to develop fast enough to be ready to go. We need to get a guy out of the transfer portal to fill those gaps. Right now, it feels like offensive lineman is the big need out of the transfer portal, and that's not ideal in my opinion to need a bunch of offensive linemen because it's one of those positions where you could really need to develop guys to be ready to play. So hopefully you're getting a guy who's performed and who's developed out of the transfer portal. But yeah, obviously you can use the transfer portal to your advantage to fulfill what's needed. And I think for most positions, there's a decent amount of players out there. For the tackle position, I'm not sure. Like I said before, low supply, very high demand.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know Buckeye Nation, obviously, we don't forget much. The number one thing that everyone's going to say we should put our funds for in this transfer portal window is a kicker. Is a kicker, a field goal kicker that can make, field goal kick. But, man, we also got, obviously, the transfer portal opened up already once championship week concluded, and a couple of guys on our team have made the announcement. Jaden Ballard, wide receiver, I think this has been his 4th year at the program. Gabe Powers, a linebacker, and then also, I guess, the biggest name that stated they're going to go ahead and get into the portal was Devin Brown, who's currently our number 2 quarterback.
Burn the boats.
Burn the boats, man. He finally had enough time to make him a new one, man. He got a canoe, and he'll be leaving Buckeye. But he did state that he'll stay with the program through the playoffs, which is obviously huge for our team and good for him because I guess he's just a good guy.
Let's talk about Devin Brown's transfer for a second because going into the year, there's a lot of talk about Julian Sayin being maybe competing for that number 2 job. It turns out Devin Brown is the number 2 quarterback, but now Devin Brown is leaving the program. So I mean, ideally, you would like the number 2, the kind of veteran guy, to be able to be good enough to take over for the next year. If he's leaving, are we anticipating a Julian Sayin, Aaron Nolan type competition for the starting quarterback next year? Or do we anticipate them going into the transfer portal and getting another quarterback to start? Or even St. Clair who's coming in. Does he compete to be that starter next year? That's really the question. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking competition, man. Obviously, I mean, the transfer portal. This year, it felt like we really did need Will Howard to come in and help us out at that position. But yeah, man, I don't know, man. I guess I'm old school in a way. I like to see our guys get developed. I like to see our guys go out there and play. I Bleav Lincoln, he's still on the roster. I don't think he put his name into the transfer portal as well. And obviously, he has limited experience, but he has some experience for playing for us as well. So I say open up the competition. We know once you kind of bring a guy in, you got to first think about the development for your guys, right? You bring some guy in, I don't know. So whoever that fifth, the guy still again in 6 year, whoever that 6 year quarterback is that you bring in, fifth, 6 year guy you bring in, how does that affect the guys that's on the roster? Because you already know why they're bringing him in. They're bringing this guy in to play. No matter what you say, it's going to be competition. You brought this guy in so he could play, right? And how does that hurt your mental? Obviously, this compete. That's what we all going to say. But we still are talking about humans. We're still talking about athletes who are infinite confident in their abilities to go out and perform. And obviously, we got top-rated guys that's here. So to me, you develop the guys that we have. You let them play. And that's why we recruited these guys. Obviously, these guys didn't come for free, right? We paid them some type of NIL package for them to be here. I would not want to see us in the transfer portal trying to replace Will Howard. And that's my thoughts on it. What's your thoughts? Would you jump in or?
I'm Ryan Day, right? I'm Ryan Day. Yep. I've lost to Michigan 4 years in a row.
4 years in a row?
No, I'm Ryan Day. Yeah. I finished this season as a national champion. We won the national championship with Will Howard, transfer portal quarterback. Right? Devin Brown leaves. We're going in with guys who are younger, right? Competition. We bring a top freshman in. But at the same time, I lost to Michigan 4 years in a row, right? And none of the guys that I have on my roster have played any type of extended minutes, because all year Devin Brown was the backup quarterback. So when we put the backup in, we put in Devin Brown. So I really don't truly know how these guys will perform in the real situation. I don't know. Do I go into the season unsure? Because, do I test it again? Do I go into a Michigan game or go through a season not knowing exactly if I have the quarterback who's going to be able to take me to the promised land? After I had success with a transfer portal quarterback, some success, lost to Michigan, won a national championship. That's my thought process. And I think they look, right? And they get a guy, if he's a Will Howard level, maybe a step above Will Howard, like if he's at that level, veteran guy, ton of experience, and can operate my offense to a point where I know he can get it done. I think they consider it. And if they can't get that type of guy, then I think, they look internally and let those guys compete for the spot. Understand that these guys are still young. If we get a guy for 1 year, hey, you got another year. Julian Sain is maybe be ready to take the reins and be the starter, or Aaron Nolan, or whoever else.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's coming up. Obviously, the main focus here is getting our guys ready for the playoffs. We expect a motivated, hair on fire Ohio State team here in a couple of weeks, getting ready for Tennessee. Next week we'll break down more Tennessee. We'll be studying the film like our guys should be studying. Man, we'll have a lot more on Tennessee, exactly what they like to do, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, and how Ohio State should attack them come the 12-team playoff race. But
real quick.
What?
Chase Herbstreit.
Oh, yeah, Chase.
Son of Kirk Herbstreit, former Ohio State quarterback, current ESPN media talent. Does all that
College
stuff.
Game Day.
Everybody knows Kirk Herbstreit.
Monday Night Football, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Chase, his son, went to Michigan. Chose Michigan. Only thing that's been reported is that Michigan offered him a scholarship. It hasn't been any reports for any other scholarships. I don't know how that's possible, but I'm interested in what your thoughts are on that.
Well, if the reports are true that he only had one Division I offer, and it was to Michigan, I'm not about to tell anyone not to take a scholarship to go to a school, right? But I think that what really makes it funny is College is expensive. Like, it keep being rumored it's going to get cheaper. No one has seen it yet. But so yeah, you take that scholarship.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting to me is like it just kind of fused that fire for a lot of Ohio State fans that Kirk Herbstreit is not the best Ohio State fan. So this really just throws the fire, the flame, the fumes on it. The clips of he always got clips. Like, he picked Oregon to win a national championship before the season. We said we got a home game. He started talking about maybe the Buckeyes should play on the road so the fans don't start booing Ryan Day. Like, all the stuff that Herbstreit kind of says around Buckeye Nation at an all-time high now. All-time.
Yeah. I'm interested, though. When Ohio State plays Michigan next year, does he have one of those split jerseys?
He better not, man. He have a split suit jacket on. Man, he better not, man. He better support his son.
Congrats to Chase, man. Congrats to Chase.
Family. And that's huge, man. That's huge, man. No matter what, man. You can't take that away. I'm sure he worked for it. Like, no one just walks into that scholarship. And maybe he beat out Bryce Underwood and it becomes a Herbstreit that leads that team up north here.
Leads the team up north, throws a pick six to lose a game, and everything will be right between the Buckeye fans and Herbstreit.
Yeah, that's right, man. But yeah, man. But catch us on. Get ready for Bet Online. They have everything. They got NFL. They got NBA. What's going on right now? NHL is playing right now. So Bet Online, always check them out. Obviously, they'll be ready and rolling for the playoffs here next week. And yeah, we'll have more on it. Follow us on YouTube, with Spotify, Apple. Follow us. We bring Buckeye news. We're always entertaining, in my opinion.
And Bet Online. Look, if you're looking for a team, an underdog to make a run in this playoffs, Penn State seems well positioned to make that run based on how things shake out. So just a little betting advice here. Go to Bet Online to get that done.
SMU to Boise State. Some might argue they got the path of least resistance. That's for sure. Right. But yeah, man, that's our show for this week. As always, we end with an OH.
Ayo.
Go Bucks, and we'll catch you guys here soon.
Go Bucks.